Here we are at Brother Jed's library again. Bookcase number 1 we went through earlier. Now we're approaching bookcase 2. These are twin bookcases. As I say, an old friend of the ministry and one of our helpers, volunteers for several years, was Eldon Orr, and he refinished these wonderful bookcases. I want to go over some of the literature I have in this bookcase. These are not arranged. My library is not arranged according to the Dewey Decimal System, although I think that would be an interesting project. One of these days, I thought maybe one of my children would teach that, and maybe they could do it, but it's just one of many things, good idea, that you never get around to. And so we have some of the classics of American and European literature here. Of course, Pudd'nhead Wilson by Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens, Robinson Crusoe, Daniel Defoe, The Songs of Hiawatha by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, who was one of my favorite poets. One of my favorite poems of Longfellow is The Village Blacksmith. Some poetry works of James Whitcomb Riley, The Canterbury Tales, Sir Walter Scott. My father did his PhD on Sir Walter Scott's theory of the novel. And I've got in my library his PhD thesis, Whittier. We got King Arthur and his knights. This is an interesting book. American Poets and Their Theology. This is a book I picked up somewhere along the way at a used bookstore. Some of America's greatest poets, they weren't necessarily what we call evangelical Christians today, but they were still men of faith, men who believed in God. They were not atheists by any stretch of the imagination. Then we come to a 9-volume set entitled The Junior Classics, a library for boys and girls. This particular library for boys and girls belonged to my dear mother. You can see the name Gelder there. Her name was Charlotte Gelder. Charlotte Gelder Smock. My beloved mother was born in 1981. Or excuse me, 1911. And she always said these were her favorite books. You can see they've been well read, and some more than others. But I thought I'd read to you from the introduction. These books were written for children, suitable for children from ages 6 to 16. Well, of course, I'm many times older than that, and still enjoy reading the children's classics from time to time. They get down to my level, so to speak, my level of reading and understanding. It says here in the introduction, a child's taste in reading is formed as a rule in the first 10 or 12 years of its life. And experience has shown that the childish mind will prefer good literature to any other if access to it is made easy, and it will develop far better on literature of proved merit than on trivial or transitory material. I think when I started school, elementary school, they were teaching the Dick and Jane series. See Dick run. Here comes Spot. Jane goes down the street. Here comes Mother. There was a day when children learned to read from the Bible, learned to read from the great classics of literature. It was inspiring, it was adventuresome, it was interesting, exciting literature. Nothing exciting about Dick and Jane. No longer John. We used to hear how Johnny can't read. No wonder what Johnny was given to read was so boring, but this is exciting literature, adventuresome literature, and we've dumbed down our children, unfortunately, today, and they don't even read much today. They got their video games or whatever they're doing today. But this is a wonderful series, the Junior Classics. Some of these are so well used, they're about to fall apart. My wife read from the Junior Classics to the children. We homeschooled all of our children, remember. This is a particular volume on stories of courage and heroism. We need the heroes. I have my heroes. I won't mention who some of my heroes are. Might offend certain people out there in Facebook land. But the context of this volume deals with Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon. The story of Joan of Arc, the maid who saved France. If you want a feminist role model, study the life of and death of Joan of Arc, who was martyred for the faith. Matter of fact, it has a chapter dealing with the death of Joan the maid. A story of Christopher Columbus for little children. Columbus is certainly one of my Christian heroes of history. Evangeline of Arcadia by Henry W. Longfellow. My daughter, oldest daughter, Evangeline Lindsay, her first name, that was a name that Longfellow made popular with his poem on Evangeline of Arcadia. There's also Evangeline Booth, who was the son of the founder of the Salvation Army, General William Booth. Evangeline was his daughter. So, read these Junior Classics. We need our heroes. These are a great series of books. These are just some miscellaneous copies they have, but one that is very important here. This is one of the first books, if not the first book, I gave to my wife, Sister Cindy. It's entitled Such a Woman, the story of Susanna Wesley. Such a woman, take her for all in all. I have never heard of, I have never read of, nor of with equal have I been acquainted. So, Dr. Adam Clark, who wrote a commentary that we were going to be looking at as we go into one of my other bookshelves. But this is she wrote on it. Jed Smock gave me this in November 1980. That's before we were married, 3 years before we were married. But already I considered that, Cindy could be a good wife. But my role model for the ideal woman was Susanna Wesley, the mother of John Wesley. And this is a little volume, and Cindy has certain passages of it underlined. I forget exactly how many children the Wesleys had. It was way up there in the teens. They lost several children to death. And it says, life at Epworth was for Susanna, her husband was of course a minister, characterized by continual struggle between the constant pressure of poverty and the demands of high-minded learning and religion. John Wesley and his brother Charles, the hymn writer, they were homeschooled by Susanna. There may have never been a better teacher than Susanna Wesley. Yet never wife loved her husband and family more. In matters of business, she was more practical than Samuel. And I found this to be true with Cindy. She's probably more practically minded in matters of business than I am. She knew that, but she still addressed her husband as my master, as Sarah addressed her husband as Lord, and taught their children when they wrote from school to use the term honored sir. I must say, I don't recall my children when they write me or telephone me or text me, say honored sir. I guess they weren't taught that. You know, of course, in the South, where Sydney was raised, she tried to get her to address elders as ma'am and sir and Mr. and Mrs., but it got to be a lost cause up here in Yankee land, which is, I don't think they show the respect for elders to this day that they do in Southern society. So this is a wonderful little book. Cindy went through this several times. The cover has been torn off the book over the time it's been in the library. And here's the poems, the complete works of Hoosier poet James Whitcomb Riley. I often read from Riley's poems to the children, especially, which was our family favorite, read it many times, The Raggedy Man. Oh, the Raggedy Man. He works for Pa, and he's the goodest man you ever saw. He comes to our house every day and waters the horses and feeds them hay. And he opens up the shed, and we all laugh when he dries out our little old wobbly calf. And then, if our hired girl says he can, he milks the cow with Elizabeth Ann. Ain't he an awful good raggedy man? Raggedy, raggedy, raggedy man. James Whitcomb Riley probably gave me largely my love for Indiana, my love for Hoosier land, and it was often the poems of Riley that has beckoned me back home here over the last 5 years to Terre Haute, Indiana. This is one of my favorite set of Bible commentaries by Alexander McLaren. And he was a preacher, gave expository sermons. He doesn't expound on every verse, but he takes certain key verses in each book, and this is his series of sermons and commentary on it. I've always found these helpful. I probably don't consult the commentaries as much as I used to, but it used to be when I started delivering sermons, I read through what most of the commentators had to say about it, at least that I had in my library, a particular passage that I wanted to expound upon. This is another young people's classics of literature, Journeys Through Bookland. This is the complete works of Charles Dickens. Of course, my favorite is A Christmas Carol by Dickens. This is The Life of Our Lord by Charles Dickens. These are the works of John Milton, commentary essentially on Paradise Lost. I inherited these books from my uncle Frank. He was a lawyer in Pennsylvania. Collections of orations from Homer to McKinley. And then we have the complete works of John Bunyan here, including Pilgrim's Progress. I have many copies of Pilgrim's Progress. This is a valuable set of books, The Constitutional History, the Christian History of the Constitution of the United States, Christian Self-Government by Verna M. Hall. She's got a 4-volume set of big red books. We use this in home educating our children. We have, of course, here a copy of Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. I remember when we were 8 years old, our daughter, Evangeline, the bookworm, carried this book around campus. And of course, the students would accuse our children of being brainwashed. But when they saw Evangeline reading Les Mis, something most of them had never read, at least, you know, if they read it in an abridged edition probably. And so they would change their attitude when they saw her reading Victor Hugo's Les Mis. It takes a while to get through. It's very thick book, as you see. So this is bookcase 2 of my library. I'm just going to span that more, more closely here. Just drop this so you can take a closer look at the volumes I have here, if we can do that. But thank you. We're going to be doing more. This is the first. Some people said they wish I had focused in more on the books. This is the first bookcase that we went through as Finney's literature, my books on apologetics, my books on moral government theology and open theism, an old set of over 100 years old of encyclopedias. So thank you for being with us, and we'll be continuing this study, probably not today, but as we look through the library of Brother Jed. Thank you for joining us.